Meteorologist Darren Tuttle here with you. It is, let's see, just about almost a quarter till 10 on your Memorial Day. I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend and we enjoyed some mostly quiet weather here across the body of the state for Sunday and today, which was nice. We've got some more storms coming in for our Tuesday, so we're going to talk about those for tonight. So thanks for joining me. A lot of you have been giving me a ton of positive feedback over the last few days, so I appreciate that. Spreading the good word of a whole different style of weather coverage that keeps everybody more calm, especially when you have tornadoes rolling through an area. So I'm glad you guys appreciate that different take on how things can be done without jumping up and down and screaming, hooting, and hollering. I think it's better just for everyone itself. It helps the kids out. For those of you folks that suffer from anxiety, helps you guys out. So again, I appreciate that. A lot of you also have downloaded my weather app, AT's Weather to Go, and you've been giving me story after story of how I warned you that twisting storms were coming, tornadoes were coming before an actual warning came out. You guys took shelter from that. In some cases, you didn't get the warning until it was too late. The official warning, that is, so you got the alert from my app first, so that was good to hear. So keep those things coming. Those kind of help me, gives me feedback on how to improve things or make things even better. So even if you have some problems with the app, let me know that as well, and I'll work on there with you. Just send me a message then, or text support and email. So lastly, a lot of you have supported me coming on in as a Facebook supporter with the fan subscriptions. That is awesome. Many of you also joined Patreon. So you guys are, hey, you're coming through, and it warms my heart that you're rewarding me in that fashion. So I think we've got a good community going, and if a good weather community where they help each other out, lift each other up, is something that interests you, there's a closed group Facebook page you can get access to once you become an official supporter. So make sure you take a look into that. But thanks again for joining me. What we're going to do is focus on the potential for tornadic supercells for tomorrow, I'm afraid. So we're going to look at the atmosphere. We're going to see what it looks like and if the cap is going to break, and if so, where. So let's go and get down to business. First thing I want to show you is the outlook detailed from the National Weather Service. And it does have, this kind of mimics the Storm Prediction Center, which is an enhanced risk in northeast Oklahoma and a slight risk elsewhere. It really all depends on where the dry line sets up as far as where storm initiation goes. Dry line is going to be somewhere out here in west central Oklahoma, and that's where we're going to see storms try to fire up and move into central Oklahoma. So as far as how far west this goes, models differ on the exact placement, but that'll be the boundary that we'll watch for late afternoon. So again, most of your Tuesday is going to be fine. Here's a look at the Storm Prediction Center outlook graphics, and you can see that slight risk continues all the way from up into the Kansas City area and the eastern half of Kansas and southeastern tip of Nebraska, and this stretches all the way back into northwest Texas as far as the slight risk goes. So that'll be the threat for storms for tomorrow. Now the wording on this from the Storm Prediction Center mentions the fact that photographs should increase during the early evening hours with the low-level jet, which is typical. So large hail damaging wind, the main threats, but there will be a window, a very small one, from late afternoon through early evening that you could get a tornado or two. Otherwise, it'll eventually form into clusters or lines, and those will move in overnight. So that's a quick recap of just kind of what you can expect here for Tuesday. Now let's take a look at the details on that. So let's close these off. So what I'm going to show you here is, this is the tech model, which I like to use a lot. And it's got storms trying to break out here around the 4 to 5 o'clock hour along that dry line out here in the west central parts of the state. But what this tells me is the look of these is that they're having a tough time breaking through the cap and getting rooted. Now eventually one does or two, but they're up here in northern Oklahoma by that happens because the cap is weaker in that area, and this is by 8 o'clock in the evening. Then those move into Kansas and they kind of fizzle out well before midnight. So this particular model is mostly quiet tomorrow, and as long as this model is on to the strength of the cap, we should have less of an impact here of severity over Oklahoma. Now, of course, it's not the only model out there, but it does relatively well in this type of an environment. Now, if you look at the high-res NAM model, it's got kind of a similar type look. You get a couple of storms that form out here in west central Oklahoma, and they kind of develop into more of a line cluster in the midnight hour and move east. So there could be a tornado threat with that. But what you are noticing is that there's really not a big outbreak anywhere over the state. Now the reason for this is we take a look at a point sounding, and it does have a potential for a tornado situation. But the issue here is the limiting factor is this red line that nudges right here. That's a strong cap in the atmosphere. So the model's having a tough time breaking the cap, and that's why it doesn't produce any storms. So it's going to be one of those deals. It's like what we call a conditional situation, meaning if the cap holds, hey, you're only going to get a storm or two, and that's it. If the cap breaks, you'll get a few storms, and those will have the potential for producing a tornado. I wish we could get better at forecasting and tell you exactly yes or no will break, but even to this day in modern era, we can't do that because we don't have the grid sampling to do that this far out. At times, I think we'll eventually have research come through and show us ways we can do that. I think a drone network will actually help. There'll be some other instrumentation that will allow us to be able to do that over time, but not in the very, very short distance of you and I in our daily activities. So it's probably going to be several years down the road. But that's a limiting factor always in forecasting severe storms. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of other models I want to show you. This is the what we call the CAM models, which sniff out potential for severe storms. This one's got a few of them that pop up here over I-35 corridor, and they move to the east. Only one looks like gets rooted in the early part of the afternoon and early evening. This is by 6 o'clock. And then it looks like a couple of more try to get developed here over central Oklahoma as we head into the mid-evening hours. So that doesn't produce a whole lot of storms. That's the take home from that one. But the ones that it does produce, move through central Oklahoma. Now here's another model. It only produces 1 or 2 storms down in kind of just southwest of the metro, but they do move into Oklahoma City area. And then finally this other model here, kind of a similar outcome, produces a few storms out there. Actually, we just looked at this one, and they kind of move off into northeast Oklahoma during the mid to late evening hours up through Tulsa. So there are several models that do say, the cap will break, but only for a few storms. The question is, what's the most favorable areas? A lot of them do like central Oklahoma. There are a couple, though, that like, northern Oklahoma. It would make sense more for northern just because the cap would be weaker up there, but sometimes you get better heating on the south end, and sometimes you have to split the difference and go in the middle, and that's what the models are doing. That's about the best they're going to be able to do for us here for tonight. Let's see. Let's go with a view here, a little bit closer, so we can see the potential as far as the rainfall as well, and we'll look at the tornado parameter index. In other words, the most favored area for stronger tornadoes should they develop. And this has, in the past, we've seen this scale go way off the chart up here into the red area. And then for tomorrow, the models are going, not so crazy. They're going, there's some yellows in there and some oranges here just west of Oklahoma City, that favored zone. So there is, like I said, the potential there for some tornadoes tomorrow. Here's a look at the simulated radar. It's got those couple of storms here in central Oklahoma and move east into northeast Oklahoma during the evening hours to midnight. So again, if you're watching here, the initiation time is not going to be until at least 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We have to maximize our peak heating. Rainfall amounts just from this particular cluster of storms that moves through, just to get an idea. There's some up around an inch. So it's not terrible, but it's not exactly good news either for those of you folks that have suffered for some flooding. But that's kind of how that plays out. Let me see what I was going to show you. Let's see if this is in. It's not quite in yet. Let's see. We'll do this. Okay, we'll come back to this here in a minute. Let me see. What else did I want to tell you or talk to you about? There may not be much with this. I'm going to look at the text sounding. And we'll go to about 7 o'clock. So it's 7 o'clock even on the text sounding. Get back over here. Let's see here. It still shows this little red area, a little bit of a cap too. So that's why the Texas Tech radar forecast look to the storms was very minimal because it still has a strong cap in there. So I'm hoping for the cap to hold, and that means most of us can go by our entire day and not have a problem at all. Unfortunately, it's one of those deals where it's right on the border, and you can't really go one way or the other. At least not now. Tomorrow in the morning, and they'll probably launch a special sounding in the afternoon, and then we'll be able to answer that question a little bit more with certainty, but that's just kind of the way things go. Okay, let's see. What else I want to show you? Oh, I will show you, this model is, it's a poor performer a lot of times. It gets a little carried away is what I'm trying to say. But what it does is it produces quite a few storms here over central Oklahoma that move through the metro. And this is around 5, 6 o'clock. There's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, midnight, that kind of a deal. 1 o'clock in the morning. Tulsa's still getting some storms. Now, that's a lot of training storms over the same area, too. And that would cause some flooding, if that were to happen for you guys up around the Tulsa area. It's got rainfall amounts of 1 to 2 inches. Looks like even 3 inches here in northeast Oklahoma City. So when you get those little training storms, that can be a problem. But you can see over the body of the state, even this model only has them in one small area, but it trains them over the same region. And these have the little helicity tracks with them. So in other words, it's got anticipation of some large hail, and probably a couple of these are going to have tornadoes with them. And the environment would support that again, assuming that they could break the cap and get rooted. So that, in shorthand, really that's your forecast for tomorrow. Let's see, I can take a look at where it thinks the dry line will be for tomorrow. Let's see here. And it's got it pretty far east. It's basically in this area here. So just the western edge of Canadian County. And so that's why it's focusing these storms right here on the western sides of I-35 and then moving them through in that favored area. Dew point values here right around, looks like 70, low 70s. And actual air temperatures during this time, let's see, where are we? When it breaks these out, we're about 84, 86 degrees, 85. So that's right at the critical temperature for the cap to break, because the cap is going to run around between 84 and 86 degrees. So it's just right there. And 1 degree can make a difference, believe it or not. There's a big difference between 84 and 85 when you're talking about breaking the cap. That's why I'm saying when you're trying to forecast 24 hours out and you're trying to forecast a 1 degree difference, it's like snow, it's like forecasting the difference between snow and ice, and all it takes is 1 degree to mess it up. Same thing with a cap. All right, let me see what this is doing. Not in yet. Okay. Try this one. Nope. All right, so this is basically an ensemble run. And I like to look at this one as a, in the earlier morning, it did do that. It did break the cap and produce storms over central Oklahoma, so I can show you that. But it's kind of like a sanity check for me as far as the forecast goes. So in other words, if I think the cap is going to break, we're going to get a couple isolated storms tomorrow, which I do think is going to happen. I look for this to kind of jive with that thinking. And this model run today did show the favored area for that to happen, basically like this, across the I-35 and 44. Now, I will say this, it got a little crazy though, a little out of control with the additional storms. If I look at the 1 hour tracks, not only does it have storms here at 5 o'clock moving through I-35. By the way, if I say I-35 corridor, it basically means literally north-south. And then when you say the corridor, you mean basically on either side. So, and you could go, 30 miles either side, or maybe 50 miles either side, but that would be the corridor when we're talking about storm initiation. So that's got at 5 o'clock, and then it's got some new stuff that kind of keeps bubbling up after that through 7 and 8 o'clock. Then it kind of moves, a lot of that moves east at 8 and 9, but it still has some stragglers, even has some new stuff kind of popping up here in southwest Oklahoma, back on the dry line again. So, and then those moving northeast in Oklahoma City by midnight, but falling apart, not nearly as strong. So that's the signal that this particular guy is telling me. So it's a little bit more proactive with storm initiation. So, okay, well that's basically all I want to tell you. There's not much else. So just prepare for a couple of isolated supercell type thunderstorms, large wind, damaging hail, that kind of deal. Did I just say large wind and damaging hail? I think I did that. Large hail and damaging wind. I'm tired. And then we'll have a couple of tornadoes, looks like, out of that. And yeah, that could be, around the Oklahoma City metro area. That's, it's in the cards. It's not a guarantee. So, but if it is, I'll be tracking them live for you in the afternoon, and we'll take it as it comes. And if you've never watched my live coverage and you kind of wonder, well, how do you cover storms? just below this, just go a couple posts down, I showed you a recap of how when I was covering the El Reno tornado and how I gave those folks about a 4-minute heads up lead time before the tornado actually happened, and then where it was going, where it was, and then track that through. So you can kind of see how I cover it versus what you might be accustomed to seeing elsewhere, and you can decide if that's kind of something you're interested in. If it's not, you're not going to hurt my feelings, but that's how I do things. Just so you know, as far as credentials go, so I am a degree meteorologist from Texas A&M University, but I'm also a radar meteorologist, and so I'm actually a radar expert with the federal government. So that's the system I work on. So radar is something I know inside and out, meaning not only how it works, how to fix it, how to manipulate it, how to advance it as far as technology goes, but also on the application meteorology side of storm analysis, that kind of stuff. So I do a lot of what the National Weather Service does when they have their guys analyzing radar minute by minute and then giving feedback of what's happening and then where the storms are going to go, how they're going to evolve. So I'm kind of tied into that, just so you know. When you watch, you're actually watching someone who's credible, and that's what their knowledge and background expertise is in, so that I'm just not just some guy on the internet. So I need to understand that, because a lot of you guys are new, just from word of mouth, and so I want you to know who it is you're watching, because you need to know the background, because not everyone you watch on television has either A, has a degree in meteorology, or B, has any radar training at all, believe it or not. It's not a universal thing. It's like any job field. Like meteorology is so vast. So you basically kind of pick what area you're interested in. Like some meteorologists will focus on chemistry, and they'll do a lot of the aerosols and that aspect of it. Some will focus on climate. So they'll focus mainly on long-term climate conditions, and that gets into the whole climate change, global warming deal. Others will focus on radar. Others will focus on just forecasting. So you can kind of pick whatever you want to get into. I try to get into everything because I wanted to see which I gravitated toward. And I really like the forecasting side and the radar side. So that's kind of what I focus mainly on and still do to this day. But just so you know, there are going to be some weaknesses and strengths with that. Because that means, if you ask me a lot of questions over chemistry side of meteorology, I'm very weak in that. But you ask me stuff on radar meteorology or forecasting, I'm going to be your man. So same thing kind of with the guys on television. If they don't have degrees, they're going to be very good in their knowledge overall for weather. They won't know everything, but they're going to know enough to do the job they're doing. Those without the radar expertise, they're going to say a lot of mistakes. There was a situation the other night where there was, I won't say who it was, but there was a situation they were covering a tornado moving through Oklahoma City in the downtown area. And they were pointing at a region where we call it a TDS, which is basically a debris signature. And it was incorrectly stated. In other words, that was actually in the inflow part of the storm. But they were telling everybody that's debris from this tornado. And that wasn't the case, because that wasn't even happening. Because it wasn't even co-located with the actual circulation part of the storm. So there can be a lot of erroneous information that you guys would never know, because you're watching who you think is an expert. But, problem is a lot of people can sometimes fake their way through whatever they do in life and kind of think they know enough what they're doing, but they really don't. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just they haven't had the proper education, and so they can make mistakes. But they do a lot of good, so you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just sometimes the person talking to you may not be as qualified as you think they are, and that can cause a problem. Typically, though, in Oklahoma City, most of the guys are very well-rounded in their education, so you get a lot of good information, and that's what is something that's lacking in most other television markets. So when you do watch anyone you pick from on television, they're going to do a relatively great job. Sure, they're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. We all do. We're all human. But compared to other markets, you guys have it really good. We've got typically the greatest technology, the most money spent. So it is what it is. So luckily for you guys, you have a better chance at seeking shelter from a heads up versus other places that may not get that. So if you're watching me and you don't live in Oklahoma City, you don't live in Oklahoma itself, and you're like, hey, you know what, I feel your pain here, use my weather app, because it'll help fill in those gaps, and that'll actually give you some alerts and heads up and notice So that way, if the other guys aren't doing enough for you, this will kind of help fill in that as well. Okay, let me see if this other model came in for the rest of the time I was looking for, and if it didn't, then I'll just let you go. Okay, so hang in there a second. Okay, that's what I was interested in. Hang on a second. Okay, so it's trying to form some storms out here on the dry line around lunchtime, which is too early, but it's an indication where it is just try to break the cap. However, when I look at the precipitation for the 1 hour situation, at that time it doesn't quite have it yet. It's got a little signal up here in far northern Oklahoma, and there's green out here in the west, so it hadn't quite come in yet from the time that I needed to come in to finish the day. But it's showing me, at least in the preliminary stage, that it's going to try to break the cap along that dry line again. So this should end up looking very similar to the morning run. And all that does is just give me confidence that we'll have a few storms out there tomorrow. So that was it with that. Well, hey, look, it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to let you guys go. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and stay weather aware for tomorrow. And that's about it. And I'll be checking in with you, assuming that a couple of these storms do go up, and we'll be tracking those if they become tornadic, or it looks like they're about to. So appreciate you guys' patronage, and we'll talk again soon. And until then, have a great night.